They mistook kindness for weakness. The conference chamber aboard the Eternal Dominion was designed to intimidate. Vaulted ceilings stretched 3 stories high, carved from a single piece of obsidian taken from a conquered world whose name no one bothered to remember anymore. Grand Admiral Valak sat on his command throne, and it was a throne, not a chair, looking down at the delegation of humans with the expression of a man watching insects crawl across his dinner plate. Ambassador Elias Thorne stood at the center of the human delegation, his weathered hands clasped behind his back, his silver hair catching the harsh overhead lights. At 73 years old, he'd represented Earth in dozens of first contact scenarios, but never one quite like this. "Let me see if I understand correctly," Valak said, his voice resonating through the chamber like distant thunder. The Korthax were massive, 8 feet tall on average, with scaled skin that ranged from deep purple to almost black, and eyes that glowed a dull red. "You want us to, what? Stop our expansion? Recognize your borders?" He said the word like it was a joke. "Because you've asked nicely?" Elias kept his expression neutral. "Grand Admiral, we're not asking you to stop expanding. We're asking you to expand in a different direction. There are unclaimed systems, resource-rich worlds with no sentient populations. We can provide you with coordinates, star charts, even assistance in." "Assistance?" Valak leaned forward, his throne creaking under his weight. "From humans? The species that builds hospitals instead of dreadnoughts? That spends more on education than defense? That sends doctors to plague worlds while we send conquerors?" Behind Elias, Captain Sarah chin stiffened. She was younger, 42, with sharp features and eyes that had seen combat, though Valak wouldn't know it from looking at the diplomatic dress uniform. She started to speak, but Elias raised a hand slightly. "Not yet." "Grand Admiral," Elias said quietly, "kindness is not weakness." Valak threw back his head and laughed. The sound echoed off the obsidian walls like breaking glass. "Kindness is the luxury of the powerful, or the delusion of the doomed. Which are you, Ambassador?" "We're the ones," Elias said carefully, "who are trying to prevent something no one wants." "What I want," Valak stood, his full height making even the massive throne look small, "is the Centauri cluster. Rich worlds, agricultural planets, mining systems. And you're in my way. You have 48 standard hours to evacuate your colonies, or we will remove them for you." Elias met his eyes. "Please, Grand Admiral, please do not make us do this." Something in his tone made Valak pause. There was no anger there, no bravado. Just a deep, weary sadness that seemed out of place in a diplomatic standoff. "Make you do what?" Valak sneered. "Build more schools? Hold more peace rallies? Perhaps you'll write us a strongly worded letter?" "Please," Elias said again. "I've seen what happens when kindness runs out. When patience ends. When peaceful people are pushed too far." He took a step forward. "Grand Admiral, I'm 73 years old. I've negotiated treaties with 17 different species. I've prevented 4 wars. And I'm begging you, don't make this the war I couldn't stop." "Your begging," Valak said coldly, "is noted and dismissed. 48 hours, Ambassador. Then Centauri belongs to the Korthax Empire." The human delegation was escorted back to their shuttle by a squad of Korthax warriors who made no effort to hide their contempt. As they walked through the corridors of the Eternal Dominion, Sarah finally spoke in a low voice. "Sir, he's not going to back down." "No," Elias agreed quietly. "He's not." "Then why did we even come here?" Elias stopped walking, causing the warrior behind him to nearly collide with his back. He looked at Sarah with tired eyes. "Because I needed to be able to say we tried everything. I needed to look him in the eye and give him one last chance. And now, Elias sighed, "we stop holding back." On the shuttle back to the human diplomatic vessel Olive Branch, a name that suddenly seemed almost mocking, Sarah watched Elias stare out the viewport at the massive Korthax fleet assembled in the system. 300 warships, dreadnoughts, carriers, destroyers. The accumulated might of an empire that had conquered 47 worlds in the last decade. "Sir," she said carefully, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." You said you've seen what happens when kindness runs out. When was that? Elias was quiet for a long moment. Mars Colony 2089. I was a young diplomatic attaché. The Viridian raiders thought human cargo ships were easy targets. Thought our refusal to arm civilian vessels meant we couldn't fight back. He turned from the viewport. They were wrong. By the time the fleet was done, the Viridian home world had been reduced to rubble, and their species was functionally extinct. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. I've never heard of the Viridians. No, Elias said softly. No one has. That's why I became a diplomat, to make sure it never happened again. He looked back at the Korthax fleet. But Valak has mistaken our mercy for weakness, our restraint for inability. And now, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Back on the Eternal Dominion, Valak was celebrating. His command staff gathered in the war room, holographic displays showing the pathetic defense forces the humans had in the Centauri cluster. 24 light cruisers. Some defense platforms. Mining ships hastily retrofitted with weapons that would probably blow up the first time they were fired. They're not even evacuating, his first officer, Drakis, observed with amusement. The colonies are still operational. Of course they are, Valak said, pouring himself a glass of Torthian wine, vintage, from a vineyard that no longer existed. They're hoping we'll back down. That their moral authority will somehow make us reconsider. He took a drink. Pathetic. Sir, Drakis gestured to a display showing economic data. I've been reviewing human resource allocation. Did you know they spend more on medical research than we spend on our entire military? I did, Valak said. It's why they'll lose. They have the resources to build a fleet 5 times our size, Drakis continued. The industrial capacity, the raw materials, the technology. But they choose to build hospitals instead. Schools. Research facilities. They've colonized 40 systems, and not one of them has fortifications that would stop a serious assault. Because they're weak, Valak said dismissively. They've convinced themselves that the universe is kind, that peace is the natural state of things. They'll learn otherwise. What Valak didn't know, what he couldn't know, because the Korthax intelligence services were too busy celebrating easy victories to look deeper, was that at that very moment, across human-controlled space, a different kind of meeting was taking place. Admiral Marcus Stone stood in the Strategic Command Center deep beneath Luna's surface, surrounded by holographic displays showing fleet positions, resource allocations, and tactical assessments. He was 61, graying at the temples, with a face that looked like it had been carved from granite by someone who was angry at Stone. Confirm the order, he said quietly. Sir, the young officer at communications looked pale. Are you sure? The protocol hasn't been activated since. Since Mars Colony, Stone finished. I know. I was there. I'm the one who helped write it. He looked around the room at officers who'd spent their entire careers hoping they'd never hear what he was about to say. Ladies and gentlemen, Ambassador Thorne has given the diplomatic go-ahead. The Korthax have been warned. They have been offered alternatives. They have chosen war. He pulled up a display showing the Korthax Empire's territories. Activate Protocol Pandora. Authorization: Stone, Marcus, Admiral, Service Number 2847-9663 Alpha. Voice confirmation: the dove is dead. Long live the eagle. For a moment, no one moved. Then, one by one, screens began lighting up across human space. In shipyards hidden in asteroid belts. In orbital facilities disguised as research stations. In underground complexes on 100 different worlds. Humanity stopped building hospitals. And started building warships. Back in the Centauri cluster, life continued as normal on the surface. Farmers still tended their crops. Children still went to school. The administrative centers still processed paperwork and held town meetings about zoning laws and water rights. But in orbit, Captain Sarachan stood on the bridge of the Olive Branch and watched as the civilian ships began to change. The cargo hauler Morning Star that had been delivering medical supplies? Its hull panels were sliding open, revealing missile batteries. The mining vessel Prosperity? Those, or processors, were reorienting, and Sarah realized with a start that they were railgun emplacements. The colony supply ships, the science vessels, the immigration transports, all of them were shedding their civilian disguises like butterflies emerging from cocoons. No, not butterflies. Bus. My God, she whispered. They were all military ships. Were and are, a voice said behind her. She turned to find Elias had joined her on the bridge. We learned from Mars Colony, Captain. We learned that sometimes, no matter how much you want peace, war finds you anyway. So we prepared. But this is... Sarah gestured at the transformation happening across the cluster. This is insane. These ships, these weapons, we've been lying to the entire galaxy about our military capability. No, Elias corrected gently. We've been honest about our intentions. We genuinely prefer peace. We genuinely want to build schools and hospitals. But preference isn't the same as capability. He pulled up a tactical display. The Korthax aren't the first species to mistake our kindness for weakness, Captain. They're just the first in a long time to push us far enough to find out the difference. 48 hours. That's all Valak had given them. And for 47 hours and 30 minutes, nothing seemed to change. The human colonies stayed put. No evacuation. No surrender. No response at all. Valak stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, watching the countdown timer tick down. His fleet was in formation, weapons hot, ready to reduce the human colonies to ash. 30 minutes, Drakis announced. Should we attempt one more communication, sir? Give them a final chance to. No, Valak cut him off. They've had their chances. Now they'll learn what it means to defy the Korthax Empire. Sir. The sensor officer's voice cracked slightly. I'm reading energy signatures from the human vessels. Power-up sequences, Valak waved dismissively. They're probably going to try to run. Target their engines first. I want prisoners to parade through the conquest festivals. Sir, these aren't propulsion signatures. These are weapon systems. Multiple weapon systems. Sir, I'm reading. The officer went pale. I'm reading plasma cannons, railguns, missile batteries, point defense systems. My God, sir, the civilian ships are armed. All of them. Heavily armed. Valak strode over to the sensor station. That's impossible. Our intelligence reports. We're wrong, sir. Every human vessel in this cluster is a warship. And sir, the officer looked up with wide eyes. They're not alone. I'm detecting hyperspace signatures. Lots of them. Something's jumping in system. The main view screen lit up with new contacts. 10, 50, 100, 200, 300. The numbers kept climbing. 500 contacts, the sensor officer reported, his voice shaking. Oh wait, 700. Sir, they're still coming. Human warships are flooding into the system. Valak stared at the screen. The ships that were appearing weren't like the civilian vessels they'd been facing. These were purpose-built warships, sleek, deadly, and emerging from hyperspace in perfect formation. How? Drakis breathed. Where did they come from? We've had eyes on human shipyards for years. You had eyes on the shipyards we wanted you to see, a new voice said over the fleet-wide channel. Admiral Marcus Stone's face appeared on every screen in the Korthax fleet. Grand Admiral Valak, this is Admiral Stone of the United Earth Fleet. Ambassador Thorne gave you every chance to walk away. You chose not to take them. You're bluffing, Valak snarled. Even with these ships, you're still outnumbered. And you soft humans don't have the stomach for real war. Stone's expression didn't change. You're right about one thing. We don't have the stomach for war. It sickens us. The waste of it. The brutality. The loss. He leaned forward slightly. But that doesn't mean we can't do it. It just means when we do it fast, we do it efficiently, and we make damn sure we never have to do it again. Big words, Valak sneered. Let's see if... He never finished the sentence. The human fleet opened fire. Later, military historians would analyze the Battle of Centauri Prime and conclude that it wasn't actually a battle. Battles implied some degree of contest, some back-and-forth exchange. What happened at Centauri Prime was more like a demonstration. The human fleet didn't just have superior numbers. They had superior weapons, superior tactics, superior coordination. Their point defense systems shot down Korthax missiles before they could get within effective range. Their railguns punched through Korthax shields like they weren't there. Their plasma cannons turned dreadnoughts into expanding clouds of debris. And through it all, the humans maintained perfect formation, perfect discipline. There was no glory-seeking, no revenge-driven tactics. Just cold, clinical efficiency. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, alarms screamed. Shields at 40%. Port side batteries destroyed. We've lost decks 7 through 12. Return fire. Valak roared. All ships, concentrate fire on. Sir, the flagship Inevitable just exploded. The carrier group Delta is gone. Sir, we've lost 30% of the fleet in the first 5 minutes. 5 minutes. In 5 minutes, the unstoppable Korthax Empire had been bloodied in a way they hadn't been in 50 years of conquest. Pull back. Valak ordered. Full retreat. Get us out of... Sir, they're jamming our hyperspace drives. We can't jump. Admiral Stone's voice came over the channel again. Grand Admiral, your fleet is now locked in this system. You have 2 options, unconditional surrender or complete annihilation. You have 60 seconds to decide. You can't do this. Valak shouted. The Galactic Council. The Galactic Council, Stone interrupted, has stood by and watched you conquer 47 worlds. They've filed complaints and passed resolutions and done absolutely nothing to stop you. We warned them that ignoring bullies only makes them bolder. They didn't listen. His voice went cold. So now we're handling it ourselves. Valak looked at his fleet, what was left of it. Burning ships. Escape pods launching. Distress signals. In 10 minutes of combat, the humans had destroyed nearly half his armada. Sir, Drakis said quietly, we should surrender. At least then our people will live. Never, Valak hissed. The Korthax do not surrender. We do not. A massive explosion rocked the Eternal Dominion as a railgun slug tore through its port side. Secondary explosions rippled through the ship. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut, sealing off entire sections. Shields are down. Weapons offline. Life support failing on decks 3 through 8. Valak gripped his throne, his red eyes blazing with fury and, for the first time in his long military career, something that might have been fear. 30 seconds, Stone's voice announced calmly. In the Centauri colonies, people watched the battle on their screens. In the Capitol building of New Providence, Ambassador Thorne stood with a group of colonists who'd refused to evacuate. Is it always like this? A young woman asked, her baby clutched to her chest. When humans go to war? Elias watched the tactical display showing the systematic destruction of the Korthax fleet. No, he said quietly. Usually, we try harder not to. What changed? They threatened you, Elias said simply. All of you. Your children. Your homes. Your lives. He turned away from the screen. People think kindness means we won't fight. They're wrong. Kindness means we fight harder because we know what we're protecting. On the Eternal Dominion, the countdown reached 0. Time's up, Stone said. Valak closed his eyes. Then, slowly, he reached forward and activated the fleet-wide channel. All Korthax forces stand down. We surrender. The words tasted like ash in his mouth. Wise choice, Stone replied. Your ships will be escorted to designated holding areas. Your wounded will receive medical attention. Your dead will be returned to your home world with full military honors. Valak's eyes snapped open. What? You heard me. We'll treat your people with the same respect we'd want for our own. That's what civilization means, Admiral. Even when you're holding the sword. As Korthax ships powered down their weapons and human vessels moved in to take them into custody, Valak sat on his throne and tried to understand what had just happened. Sir, Drakis said hesitantly, they could have destroyed us. Completely. Why didn't they? Valak didn't answer. He was remembering something Ambassador Thorne had said. Kindness is not weakness. The aftermath of the Battle of Centauri Prime rippled across the galaxy like a shockwave. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. Ambassador Thorne attended via holographic link, and for once, every single member species was present. "This is outrageous!" the Velkeen representative shrieked. "Humans have revealed themselves as warmongers. They've been hiding a massive military fleet." "Hiding?" Elias's hologram turned toward the Velkeen. "We've been building ships in plain sight for 70 years. You just chose not to notice because they were labeled civilian vessels. Did you think a cargo ship capable of crossing interstellar space wouldn't also be capable of mounting weapons? You deliberately deceived." "We deliberately prepared," Elias interrupted, "because history taught us that hoping for peace while being incapable of defending yourself is just a slower way to die." He looked around the chamber. How many complaints did this council file about Korthak's expansion? How many resolutions? How many strongly worded letters? Silence. "That's what I thought," Elias continued. "You were happy to condemn their actions as long as someone else was the target. But none of you were willing to actually stop them. So we stopped them ourselves. By revealing you've been militarizing your entire society." "No," Elias said firmly. "By revealing that we're capable of defending ourselves when necessary. There's a difference." The Korthaks thought kindness meant weakness. They were wrong. Kindness means we build hospitals first and warships second. But we still build the warships. A new voice spoke up, elder and thoughtful, belonging to the Archon delegate, one of the oldest species in the council. "Ambassador Thorne, a question. What happens now? You've demonstrated your military might. Will humanity begin its own expansion? Its own empire building?" Elias was quiet for a moment. Then, 3 hours ago, the first Korthaks prisoners were processed into our detention facilities. Do you know what happened? The human guards brought them food, medical supplies, blankets. One of the guards, a woman named Lieutenant Jessica Park, she saw a Korthaks soldier crying. Do you know what she did? "What?" the Archon asked. She sat down next to him and asked if he wanted to talk about it. And he did. He told her about his family, his children, how he'd been conscripted into military service and hadn't seen them in 8 years. Elias's voice softened, and Lieutenant Park pulled out her personal communicator and helped him make a call home, made sure his family knew he was alive. The council chamber was silent. "That's who we are," Elias said. "We can fight. God knows we can fight. But we'd rather heal. We'd rather build. We'd rather make friends than enemies." He looked directly at the Archon. "So no, we won't be starting an empire. We'll be doing what we've always done, trying to make the galaxy a little bit better, one hospital at a time." 6 months later, Ambassador Elias Thorne walked through the corridors of the Olive Branch, which had been reassigned to a new mission, coordinating humanitarian relief to the former Korthaks colonies. Worlds that had been conquered and stripped of resources were now receiving aid shipments, medical teams, and reconstruction assistance. He found Captain Sarah Chen in the observation lounge, staring out at the planet below, formerly a Korthaks mining world, now in the process of being cleaned up and returned to its native population. "You wanted to see me, Captain?" "Sir." Sarah turned, and Elias noticed she'd been crying. "I just got a message from the surface. From a Korthaks family. They wanted to thank us. To thank humanity for treating them like people." "And that made you cry?" "They said they'd never been treated like people before. Not even by their own government." Sarah wiped her eyes. "We fought them, sir. We destroyed their fleet. Killed thousands of their soldiers. And they're thanking us." Elias moved to stand beside her at the viewport. "That's the thing about kindness, Captain. It's not weakness. It's not naivety. It's the hardest damn thing in the universe to maintain, especially after violence. But if we can show mercy to people who tried to destroy us, if we can help rebuild what we were forced to tear down, then maybe, just maybe, we break the cycle." "Do you think Valak understands that now?" "Probably not," Elias admitted. "Men like Valak rarely change. But his people? The soldiers who thought they were fighting for glory and found compassion instead? They'll remember. And maybe their children will grow up in a galaxy where kindness isn't mistaken for weakness. Sarah was quiet for a moment, then, "Sir, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "Why did you become a diplomat? After Mars colony, after seeing what we're capable of, why spend your life trying to avoid war?" Elias smiled sadly. "Because I've seen what we're capable of, Captain. And it terrifies me." He gestured at the planet below. "We can destroy worlds. We can build weapons that could glass entire systems. But we can also choose not to. We can choose to heal instead of hurt. To build instead of destroy. That choice, that's what makes us human. And I've spent my entire career fighting to preserve our right to choose kindness. Even when others mistake it for weakness? Especially then," Elias said. "Because the moment we let others define our strength by their standards, we lose what makes us special." Down on the planet, in what had once been a Korthax garrison and was now a refugee processing center, a man mopped the floors. He was tall, in his late 50s, with a slight limp in eyes that had seen too much. The Korthax guards who'd been processed as civilian detainees walked past him without a second glance. Just a janitor. Probably a local hire. Nothing important. Lieutenant Park, reviewing paperwork at the main desk, looked up and caught the man's eye. She smiled. He nodded back, a gesture of acknowledgement that spoke of shared experience. His name was Marcus Chin, Sarah's uncle, actually, though he hadn't used that name in 20 years. Once upon a time, he'd been Colonel Marcus Chen, Special Forces, Mars Colony Defense. He'd been there when the Viridians attacked. Been there when humanity showed what happened when peaceful people were pushed too far. He'd retired after Mars Colony, unable to reconcile what he'd done with who he wanted to be. Took a job as a janitor. Quiet work. Honest work. A way to feel human again. But when Protocol Pandora was activated, when the call went out, he'd volunteered. Not for combat. His fighting days were done. But for this. For the aftermath. For showing enemies that they could become something else. "Mr. Chin," a Korthax child said in halting English, tugging at his sleeve. "Can you help? My mother, she's sick." Marcus set down his mop. "Show me where." As he followed the child through the refugee center, past former enemies who were learning to be just people again, he thought about Ambassador Thorne's words, "Please do not make us do this." They'd been forced to do it. To show their fangs. To reveal that beneath the kindness was a capacity for violence that terrified even themselves. But now, in the aftermath, they were doing something harder. They were showing that the violence was the exception, not the rule. That humanity's true strength wasn't in its warships or weapons, but in its choice to use them only when necessary, and to put them away as soon as possible. In the Korthax Empire, Grand Admiral Valak sat in his cell on a human prison station. It wasn't what he'd expected. Comfortable. 3 meals a day. Educational programs. The guards were professional but not cruel. He'd even been allowed to maintain contact with his family. It was humiliating in a way he couldn't quite articulate. One day, Ambassador Thorne came to visit him. "Why?" Valak asked without preamble. "Why treat us with mercy we wouldn't have shown you?" Elias sat down across from him, moving slowly. His age was catching up with him. "Because if we become like you, then what was the point of fighting? We didn't go to war to prove we could be cruel. We went to war to prove we wouldn't have to be. We would have destroyed your colonies. Enslaved your people." "I know," Elias said quietly, "and we would have stopped you. But once stopped, what purpose does vengeance serve? What does cruelty accomplish except creating the next generation of enemies?" Valak was silent for a long time. Then, "My people are speaking of rebellion. Of resistance. They say we should not accept this humiliation." "And what do you say?" Valak looked at his hands. Once the hands of a conqueror, now just the hands of a prisoner. "I say they should visit the refugee centers. See how humans treat those who have nothing. I say they should watch human doctors working 20-hour shifts to save Korthax lives. I say they should talk to the guards here, who ask about our families and bring us news from home." He looked up at Elias. "I say they should learn what I learned too late, that mercy is the privilege of the strong, and humanity has earned the right to show it. Elias stood to leave, then paused. Grand Admiral, you're eligible for parole review in 18 months. Good behavior, participation in the rehabilitation programs. You could be home in 2 years. Why tell me this? Because we're not your enemies anymore, Valak. We never wanted to be. We just needed you to understand that kindness isn't weakness, it's a choice. And we're choosing to give you a second chance. He moved toward the door. Don't waste it. Back on Earth, in a small apartment in the diplomatic quarter of Geneva, Elias Thorne sat at his desk and wrote his final report. He was retiring, really retiring this time. 74 years old, and he'd finally done what he'd spent his entire career trying to avoid. He'd gone to war, but he'd also helped win the peace that followed. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. There was a knock at his door. Sarah Chin stood there, now promoted to captain of the Hope, a hospital ship being sent to provide aid to former Korthax worlds. Sir, I wanted to say goodbye before shipping out. Come in, Captain. Please. She entered, looking around at the modest apartment. This is where you live? I expected something more. I don't know. Grand. Elias chuckled. I'm a diplomat, not a rock star. Please. As he poured, Sarah said, Sir, I've been thinking about what you said. About choosing kindness. About maintaining it even after violence. And I'm scared I'll forget. That I'll let the war define me instead of the peace. Elias handed her a cup. Then you remember this, Captain. The day we stopped holding back wasn't our finest moment. It was necessary, but it wasn't fine. Our finest moment comes now, in how we treat the defeated, in how we rebuild, in how we choose, every single day, to be kind even when it would be easier to be cruel. Is that what you've been doing? Choosing kindness every day? Every damn day, Elias confirmed. Some days it's harder than others. Some days I want to be angry, to be vengeful, to remember that they would have destroyed us without a second thought. But then I remember, if I let them make me cruel, then they've won anyway. Not the war, the deeper battle, the one for our souls. Sarah sipped her tea. Uncle Marcus, you know him, right? My actual uncle. The janitor who isn't really a janitor? He told me something once. He said that after Mars colony, after what we did to the Viridians, he looked at his hands and couldn't recognize himself anymore. That's why he retired. Why he became what he is now. And what did you say? I asked if he regretted it. The fighting. The violence. Sarah looked into her tea. He said no. He regretted that it was necessary. But he didn't regret doing what was necessary. And then he said something that stuck with me. The monsters are the ones who enjoy it. The heroes are the ones who do it anyway and hate themselves for it. Elias nodded slowly. Your uncle is a wise man. And he's right. We did what we had to do. We showed the galaxy that humanity's kindness is a choice, not a weakness. And now we choose to be kind again. Even to people who don't deserve it? Especially to people who don't deserve it, Elias said. Because that's when it matters most. Anyone can be kind to friends. True strength is being kind to enemies. 6 months later, Captain Sarah Chin stood on the bridge of the Hope as it entered orbit around Korthax Prime. The Korthax homeworld. She'd expected resistance, protests, maybe even violence. Instead, she found something she never anticipated, a welcoming committee. The new Korthax government, elected, not appointed after the old military regime collapsed, had requested humanitarian assistance, medical supplies, educational materials, agricultural technology, all the things they'd once scorned as weak. And humanity had sent them, because that's what humans did. Sarah beamed down to the surface with her medical team, and as she stepped out into the Korthax capital, she saw something that made her stop. A statue, newly erected in the central plaza. It showed 2 figures, a Korthax warrior and a human doctor, shaking hands. The plaque at the base read, in both Korthax and English, "They taught us that strength is not in conquest, but in mercy. That true power is not in destruction, but in the choice to rebuild." This monument stands as a reminder, never mistake kindness for weakness. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. She pulled out her communicator and sent a message to Ambassador Thorne, now enjoying his retirement on a beach somewhere in the Mediterranean. "Sir, I think we did it. I think we actually changed something." His response came quickly. "We showed them what we're capable of, Captain. Both the darkness and the light. Now they get to choose which example to follow. I think they're choosing well." "What made you so sure they would?" "Because everyone wants to be kind, Captain. Everyone wants to build instead of destroy. They just need someone to show them it's possible. That's humanity's gift to the galaxy, not our weapons, but our refusal to let those weapons define us." Sarah looked at the statue again, at the Korthax children playing around its base, and she smiled. "Then let's keep giving that gift, sir. The galaxy needs it." "Agreed, Captain. Agreed." And somewhere, on a prison station orbiting a human colony, Grand Admiral Valak watched a human guard teaching Korthax prisoners how to grow vegetables in a small greenhouse. He'd once commanded fleets, once conquered worlds, once believed that power came from the barrel of a gun. Now he watched enemies become gardeners and realized what Ambassador Thorne had been trying to tell him from the very beginning. True strength wasn't in the ability to destroy. It was in the choice not to. Humanity had that strength. And now, slowly, painfully, so did the Korthax. The galaxy was learning. Kindness was not weakness. It was the hardest, most terrifying thing in the universe. And humanity had mastered it.